Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today and to share my story. Next. So a bit about me. I live in the beautiful city of Edinburgh in Scotland with my 4 children and was first diagnosed de novo with metastatic HER2 breast cancer in 2014. I was told I had 2 to 3 years to live, which was a huge shock. Immediately, I reached out to anyone who might be able to give me some advice and hope. Professor Steve Jackson put me in touch with Professor Caldas, who is also presenting today, hence me telling this story. And I emailed Carlos to ask if I was on the right treatment. He said I was in excellent hands at the Edinburgh Clinic. So it seems we've come full circle with both Carlos and I here today. And I want to thank him for taking the time all those years ago to give hope to a patient he didn't even know. It meant a lot. Next. I decided early on in my treatment journey that I had to find a trial at some point, mainly because none of the targeted HER2 therapies seemed to work for me. Despite no research background, I took on clinicaltrials.gov and would send my very open-minded oncologist lists of trials that I'd found in the UK and also in Europe. He eventually found a local androgen receptor trial. I tested positive for it, was duly scanned, but to my horror discovered I had 3 small brain mets. That meant I wasn't eligible for the trial anymore. The mets were treated with whole brain radiotherapy, and I then campaigned for and finally self-funded 3 cycles of a miracle new HER2 drug, which wasn't licensed in Scotland at that time, TDM1, also known as Kadcyla. I was devastated when it didn't work and was now beginning to run out of options. I asked myself, why did none of these HER2 treatments work for me? I wondered if a genomics test might provide that answer, but I probably couldn't afford one. And in 2015, it was still relatively early days for patients to take the test. Few matchable options and a waste of money, I was told. So we took the family to New York for what I thought would be a last holiday. And on my return, my oncologist offered me either more chemo or the last place on a phase 1B TKI trial in Glasgow. I took the trial option because I had nothing to lose and had an immediate and a very strong response to it. It's called ipertinib and it's made by Shionogi. But it was luck, a great oncologist and pure determination on my part that got me on the trial. I'm still on that drug now, but with compassionate use access. Next. In the last 5 years on this incredible trial, I've realized many patients with advanced cancer don't get the same opportunity. We're now truly in the age of genomics, which most would agree should make it easier to match patients with trials. So why do too many clinical trials fail to recruit to time or target or to retain patients? Why is there a gap between what many patients want, access to trials, and what they actually get? Well, I think there's a number of reasons for this. The lack of a single patient-friendly database. And don't tell me clinicaltrials.gov is the best we can do when we can take a drone selfie on Mars. Clinicians are too busy and don't often discuss the option of a trial early enough with patients. Patients lack the appropriate knowledge about trials and nobody seems to educate them at all. In terms of genomics, there's little knowledge about it in all groups, amongst healthcare professionals and also patients. And lastly, there's hugely inflexible trial criteria. Next. Despite these challenges, many patients actively seek out trials. They're a potential lifeline and they give us hope. But as with my androgen receptor trial, this doesn't always work out. So let me tell you Angela's story. She's a 46-year-old mother of 3 and was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer in 2018. She quickly discovered she's endocrine resistant and decided to pay privately for a Foundation 1 test. She discovered she had several matchable mutations, FGR1, ATM, and AKT1, and was lucky that there were several potential UK trials for her. This should have been a slam dunk for her to get on a trial and a win for genomic testing, but sadly not. She's ineligible for 4 trials simply because she's had too many lines of treatment, or in one case, because she's already been on treatment that targeted her ATM mutation. Surely, if you test for these biomarkers, should you still need such rigid criteria to access a trial? Next. Accessing a trial has given me 5 years of life I didn't expect to have, and I want every patient to have that same opportunity. We saw how quickly trials were set up and approved during COVID, and Angela's story and mine illustrates the current problems patients face. ASCO seems to agree, and this year published a report making evidence-based recommendations focused on expanding eligibility criteria. These recommendations included reviewing trial washout periods, prior therapies, and patient performance status. Patients in the real world have multiple treatment lines and comorbidities, and trials need to reflect that. A very recent study on non-small cell lung cancer, just published in Nature, also concluded the AI-driven analysis of real-world data meant that inclusion criteria can be relaxed without compromising patient safety. So my ask of all of you is to please think creatively about how you can make your trials more accessible for patients. Do you really need to exclude patients who've had a line or two of chemo? Can you reduce the washout period? Let's not restrict trials to the cancer Olympians, of whom there are very few. Next. Another challenge we face is fundamentally one of perspective. Clinical trial experiences and recruitment are often designed around the wrong customers: the research site, the healthcare professional, or the pharma company. Often the last perspective considered is that of the patient. So how can you put patients at the heart of what you do? Well, we patients want engaging and easy to read patient materials, even when the subject is something as complex as molecular testing. On the screen, you'll see an example that we in ICGC Argo produced for patients that might be interested in the subject. I think it's well laid out, very visual, and written in plain English. So you could use us patients to help you design those more patient-friendly materials. But there's so much more you could do. You could partner with patient organizations to educate and support them. For example, run webinars and online education courses for them. Another overlooked area, I think, which I've already mentioned, is the lack of a patient-friendly and up-to-date database of trials. Why can't we collaborate and develop a single patient-focused one? And all of these things will help for you to get your trial cohorts. There's one more thing that I believe can really help with recruitment, and that's funding patient trial advocate nurses. Next. In the USA, I believe they're called cancer navigators, and they support patients in matching them to trials. In the UK, this is a very new idea. The charity Blood Cancer UK employs a full-time senior research nurse funded by pharma to help close the gap on what patients often want access to trials and to enable them to access trials much more easily. I work with a small Scottish charity which supports patients with metastatic breast cancer. And we've just launched the same service as a local pilot. We're funding an experienced research nurse to raise awareness of research, trials, and genomics amongst MBC patients and to help them match them to potential UK trials. So far, it seems to be going very well, and we hope to expand it later this year. This, or a similar role, could be extended to cover genomic testing also. Someone who helps to liaise with companies and researchers to ensure patients get access to genomic technology as a routine part of clinical care. Perhaps industry could look to help fund these sort of patient-facing education and navigating roles. Next. The topic of sharing data is so important. I think we all know that genomic research promises major advances in improving the care of patients. These benefits, however, will only reach cancer patients if researchers and clinicians share their data. ICGC Argo want to accelerate genomic oncology research and need the data from many, many patients to achieve this. So I'd urge you to not hold back sharing data that could help others learn more about and develop treatments for this terrible disease. I'm aware some patients are concerned about how their data will be used. So I think it's also time to start a conversation around this and to educate them. Explain that their data is safely held and that you take their privacy very seriously. Explain that the benefit of sharing their data will help accelerate research into cancer, ultimately benefiting all patients and helping to find tomorrow's treatments. Next. Next. Oh, thank you. And now on to the other big C, COVID. I don't think I can do this presentation without talking a little bit about what happened last year and is still ongoing from a cancer patient's point of view. When COVID hit last year, there was immediate concern in the community about how many services were being shut down. Labs closed, resources diverted, trials stopped, treatments delayed. We patients also watched the daily briefings on COVID statistics, wondering how this data had been gathered so easily when some of us have spent years calling out the need for accurate data collection on advanced cancer patients. All of the focus seemed to be on COVID patients, and cancer patients felt thrown under the bus. We were right to be concerned as we now face a huge cancer crisis, and I've heard some experts say that survival rates may now go backwards as a result. Next. As the pandemic rolled on, the cancer patient community watched enviously as vaccines were developed and trialled at supersonic speed. In terms of research, the usual journal paywalls were down, allowing researchers to share data and collaborate. The trial process was faster, bureaucracy was minimised, there were rapid approvals, and trials quickly moved through each stage. And data was collected quickly, accurately, and across the UK. The normal bureaucracy and what seems to me glacially slow processes were thrown out of the window, and the results in terms of effective vaccines for the world were astonishing. So wouldn't it be amazing if we could just apply a fraction of that energy, creativity, and collaborative culture to future cancer research? Next. And while I'm talking about genomic testing, I mentioned at the start of this talk that I asked my medical team back in 2015 about paying for a Foundation 1 test, to be told that it would be a waste of money. If we fast forward 5 years, I'm still asking, but the answer is different. There are many more tests available and many more matchable drugs in development. By a stroke of luck, I meet Andrew Biankin and learn about the Glasgow Cancer Genomics test that he and the team, Susie Cook and Philip Beer, had developed. It's very affordable and covers all known cancer mutations. We embarked on a round of promoting the test at conferences and on the radio, hoping that we could persuade the NHS in Scotland to take it on and use it as standard of care for patients with advanced or rare cancers. Ultimately, we don't succeed, and then COVID intervened to halt everything. But I did get my cancer finally tested on the Glasgow test and discover that I'm strongly HER2 positive, plus have a KRAS mutation. On the one hand, it's disappointing that I don't have any mutations that will lead me down a new treatment path at this point, but I'm pleased I finally have that knowledge about my cancer and that through ICGC, my data may one day help other patients. Next. I have a good news story that I want to finish with. I'm showing my age here, but I wonder how many of you like David Bowie, or Bowie, and know his song 5 Years from the Ziggy Stardust album. I'm sure a few of you do. I've always loved him and his creativity. When I was diagnosed back in 2014 and told I only had a few years to live, I used that song as a bit of a goal. I just wanted to live for 5 years. And of course, when I reached 5 years, it wasn't enough and I wanted more. But it was the sheer good luck of getting on my current trial that means I'm still here and talking to you today. I'm very grateful for the trial and the extra years of life it has given me. And in 2019, I decided to contact the researchers at Shionogi who developed ipertinib. I suspected that they rarely see the outcome of their years of hard work. So I sent a note of thanks and a photo of me and my family to the company. As a result, I ended up in the company magazine and received many lovely messages back from the research team. And on the next slide, I'll read out some of the messages. Next. I think the translation could maybe be improved, but I think you'll get the gist of what the researchers have said. So the first comment, I shed happy tears. I cannot express my feeling well, but I really want to keep this feeling in my mind. I, as one of the researchers, hope to receive such greetings from foreign countries. And the last one I'll read out. I was a core member of the Upertinib project. I read her letter while at work. I was so happy and near to tears with emotion. I'm really happy that our medicines seem to be closer to the patient's life. I was surprised at the emotion in the responses I received and would love to see much closer relationships develop in the future between researchers and the patients that they work tirelessly for. This email exchange made me very happy as well as the researchers. Next. So my last slide, and I just want to summarize, and of course I had to get a picture of David into here as well, and I'm hoping that at least you may remember this presentation because of the Aladdin scene photograph. So my request for all of you today, be more Bowie and think creatively. We need to think big if we want to make things up to cancer patients who were ignored during the pandemic. For example, President Biden has just announced the creation of a new health agency and an investment of $6.5 billion to fund innovative and creative approaches to cancer and other diseases. From protocol design to trial recruitment, walk in your patient's shoes and try to put them at the heart of every decision you make. Reduce the inflexible and complex eligibility criteria to access trials. This is especially important for advanced cancer patients who need hope and a lifeline. Look at ASCO's recommendations and implement them now. Educate patients about the benefits of research, trials, genomics. I think there is already much more interest in this area because of the regular news stories about how the COVID vaccines were developed. So let's capitalize on this interest. Stop the one-size-fits-all approach to treating cancer patients and use the science that's available and not guesswork to treat them. Democratize molecular testing. Make it available to all advanced cancer patients and not just those that can afford it. And finally, please collaborate and share your data so that we can achieve more and faster. Don't go back to your silos and bunkers. You collaborated for the greater good during the pandemic, and just think what that same approach could do for cancer patients who have been left behind. And that's all. Thank you for listening.